Well, welcome, Mary.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Oh my gosh. Well, congratulations on this book, Lessons from a Reluctant Healer, on learning to listen to the still small voice within to better bring your gifts to the world. Who doesn't need that?
I think that it's something that applies to every single human being for sure.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about what brought this book to life, which I really love the cover, by the way, with listeners who are not watching the video. There's this beautiful world that's gold, which I love, and then a woman with angel wings kind of holding it. So it's just a really sweet visual. So tell us about what led you to bring this book to life.
Well, the book began as sort of journal entries over a few years. And then back in 2018, a friend told me about NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, where you can challenge yourself to write 50,000 words in 1 month. So I was like, oh, that would be a great way to start shaping these individual entries into something.
Yeah.
So I used that opportunity to start to weave together my different journal entries. There weren't a lot of them at that time, maybe a dozen. And once that was woven together, I started thinking of other things. And over the course of a couple of years, I expanded on it and turned it into something bigger. But I realized that it wasn't necessarily something that could be done chronologically, but I also didn't want to just make it about categories. So that was the hardest part, kind of shaping it. And during one of the gifts of things shutting down during the first year of COVID was I had a lot of time to write. So I used that to just really hone my words, worked with an editor to shape it. And yeah, and as I was writing it, I started to notice patterns, started seeing things that helped flesh out the whole story. So it was kind of a personal exercise in a way, but I also felt that it was something that could be a benefit to other people.
Well, for sure. And you know what I love about what you just said is taking journal entries, right? Or for people who have blogged over the years, taking those blog posts and then bringing the material together. But as you say, it's like, okay, so I have all these different pieces. Where's the structure, right? So I love how you were able to work with an editor to kind of suss that out, because that's a really hard part. But the beauty is a lot of it was written, right? And then it's just bringing it together and then editing it and altering it.
Right. And sometimes it takes, or it's very helpful to have an objective third party look at it, with a fresh eye, because if you're writing from journals, you're so caught up in it that it's hard to see the patterns sometimes. But I did discover some of the patterns on my own too, which was also just a great exercise in self-discovery, self-growth.
The beauty of rereading journal entries, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
so profound. So you talk in the intro about feeling a connection to spirit at an early age. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think partly it was because my mom had been a theology and divinity major, so maybe there was some of that. And my best friend growing up, her mom was very spiritual too, and I would hear the moms talking about things. Sometimes they were coming from very different spiritual traditions, but yet they met together in this common space where they both saw I think their responsibility in the world to be kind and caring and embracing all people. So that was the foundation of it, that I think was just always there for me. But I also just always had a kind of feeling of connectedness to nature and to spirit. As a kid, I'd hear other kids talking about God, like God was a man kind of judging us all. And I never felt that. I felt there was this greater kind of spirit in the world that was all about love and flowing through everything. Partly too, my father was Japanese, and even though he wasn't an overtly religious or spiritual person, I think I picked up on a lot of that kind of Taoist Zen energy running through everything, respect for nature. So I had that. And then I was just naturally, naturally in tune with that. I remember finding a dead bird with my best friend and I tried to bring it back to life. I thought that if I prayed over it and held it, that I could bring it back to life somehow, which didn't happen. So, so we ended up having a little funeral and and praying for this bird to send that on its way. So there were things like that. I also, yeah.
Yeah. No, it is interesting how like before we're bombarded with a lot of shoulds or, organized religion at times, it can be really helpful to be like, what was my connection like to this higher power or bigger things as a child? Now, one of the things you mentioned and kind of early on is discovering patterns when you went through and reread. And one of the patterns that you noted, which I thought was really important, because you've probably heard this study about hospice nurses that ask the dying, what's your biggest regret? And the number one regret of the dying is living somebody else's life. And so you talked about this, and I just love this, discovered a pattern of listening to other people's opinions of what you should be doing. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'd say that I was definitely, it was on a subconscious level taught that, girls are supposed to be agreeable and nice. And I definitely saw that pattern in many of the women around me. Even though they were strong individuals, there was still that part that wanted to people please. Mm-hmm. And so I found that I didn't think I was like that. It was only going back and reading about these different phases in my life where I was realizing that I would often do that I would second guess myself. I would go into something very confidently, and then I'd let other people's voices, whether it was on the outside or in my head, kind of talk me out of things. And that can only lead to unhappiness. It's only when we're following our hearts that we're able to really live a fulfilling and meaningful life. So so that's a life lesson. I still catch myself at times stopping and saying, no, that's not my thought, or no, that's not true. So it's a constant vigilance, I guess, to check in with your heart. I went to a retreat a couple of years ago in the before times, and one of the exercises was really simple. We went into meditation for just a couple of minutes, got really quiet, and then asked ourselves 3 times, what does my tender heart say? And you go into it with maybe an issue in mind or some problem you're trying to solve, and it's really, really beautiful and simple and gentle kind of exercise, and it helps you get back to that core.
I love that. I was in I was like, what was I in? It was a training last week, and the facilitator, it was for ACT, which is a form of a psychotherapy theory. And the facilitator at the beginning was like, check in with what would help you feel most resourced. And, it's just this idea of like, is your well full, right? Like, how can you make sure your well is full as we're going into 2 days of 8-hour training? And so I really like this, it's like, okay, what does your tender heart need? What does your body need? How can you be most resourced? How can you show up that way? And I'd never really heard resourced, and I really liked that. It's a beautiful, idea to do that sort of inquiry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we could all stand to check in with ourselves more often. Yeah, that, as it's called, the 3-centered awareness. Where am I emotionally? Where am I physically? Where's my head right now?
Totally. I mean, that's like, also say a mindful check-in, right? Is that exact thing. It's like mentally, physically, emotionally, where am I? And we usually just pay attention to our thoughts, and yet our bodies and emotions have so much to teach.
Right.
So I like this because you say, Sometimes spirit will bonk you on the head, reminding you that you have lost focus. And so, we can start down paths, right? Where we just are like, things are not going smoothly. Does not feel like the right path. And tell us what you mean. Is that what you mean whenever you say spirit will bonk you on the head?
Yes. Yeah. If you find that you're kind of going along, like again, in your head, doing what you think you're supposed to be doing and not what you're actually supposed to be doing, um, you can find that things just aren't going right, as you said. You feel like you're swimming against the tide. But when you do get it back into that realm of what comes naturally for you, what you're meant to be doing, although I say that meant to be, there are many things I think we're supposed to be doing in this world, but when we're on that right path, then things actually flow and it feels like you're being carried along, and serendipitous things will happen. The right people will show up, all because we're aligned with where we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a better space too, to recognize the things that we're supposed to recognize, to notice the people that are there to help us.
And, I do feel like, because I know that you crystallized this book during the pandemic, and it's like, if you think about it, I mean, what an amazing time we've had of some pretty intense existential thinking, right? When you're so confronted with life and death on a regular basis, and it's, you see it in the news, people are talking about it, we're getting vaccinated, it's like all this sort of stuff. You're just like, oh my, I mean, it was big. And that's why, right, there's like the great resignation. I mean, a lot of people are rethinking, how do I want to spend my days and ultimately my life?
Right. We've all been confronted with mortality, as you said, the finality or finiteness of time, and how are we going to spend that. And I think also these younger generations who are coming in are so much quicker to point out when things just aren't right. So there are a lot of movers and shakers, like Greta Thunberg and the kids, Parkland kids, who I mentioned in my book, who are just like, this is not okay. And they say it out loud, and the rest of us are like, well, yeah, we always knew it wasn't okay, but we didn't have we kind of got caught up in that, as you were just talking about, the kind of the wrong path, or what we should be doing as told by other people rather than what we should be doing. And so, this has just shown a light on all that needs to be fixed in our world, in ourselves, in our communities, in our systems. And it's been a great opportunity. I was talking to a friend today. We were both saying that the last couple of years has felt like almost like swimming in place, in a way that even though we've both done a lot of things in the last couple of years, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of forward momentum. It's almost kind of nebulous. And I've heard the term liminal space from friends over the last couple of years, and other mystical writers, contemplative writers, which I really love. It's the idea of that kind of in-between space, sort of between waking, dreaming, between here and now. It's almost like being in the womb. And I feel like these times right now are especially fertile, ripe for all of us to reassess, reevaluate, again, what has been and what can be. And even though it feels like, well, there's a lot going on, there's tons going on, but also people have talked about how weird time has felt and how disorienting it is. And I think it all is just because we're in this liminal space, this space in between the way it was and the way it will be. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. It does. And I'm sure listeners can relate. It's just this feeling of, like, my partner always says, time is a flat circle, right now it is. So you talk about discovering your gifts. Okay. And the importance of that. Tell us, how you discovered yours and how we can kind of get more in touch with our gifts. Because, one thing that I notice is we as a society, we love stories like Rudy, that little like kid who was not very strong and then he becomes a star football player. It's like the ability to like rise from, nothing. And yet, what we read is it actually makes more sense to build on your strengths. Not that becoming Rudy isn't lovely, but we're probably more likely to grow if we focus on what we already have some sort of a gift in.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell us kind of, about your experience and, being a PhD in psychology, right? So, a lot of this, not just from like, oh, it's my feeling, it's also based in science.
Right. Right. Well, we were talking before about the shoulds and things that we hear. And I think from a very young age, a lot of people are told what they are good at or what they should be doing. And they begin to integrate that into their internal belief system. An example, a really good example, is my ex-husband. When I first met him, he would always say, I'm really bad at math. My teachers told me I'm bad at math. My mom told me that the teachers told her, and so she always told me I was bad at math. But I had noticed that he was really facile with numbers. Like he could do incredible calculations in his head. So I said, I don't think that's true. You might want to explore that, because you love chess, which is kind of numbers, it's odds, it's statistics, and he loves statistics, baseball stats and things. So he started looking into that, and he eventually got his PhD in biostatistics, and now he's one of the statisticians working at the front line of Operation Warp Speed. So yeah, so it's funny that he really believed it, even though he had evidence every day of how good he was at math, but yet that voice. So partly it's having people around you who can tell you, here's what I see in you, in an objective way. That's not always easy to find, but they are out there. Part of it too is one thing I always did with coaching clients is start by asking them, when you're let's see, how do I put this? What types of things, when you're doing them, you lose track of time, you just feel like you could do it forever, and you just get so caught up in the enjoyment or fascination of doing it that everything else kind of disappears and you're in the flow.
Right.
So that's one big clue. So yeah, I was a big fan of Mahai Csikszentmihalyi even before positive psychology was a big thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's another way. Another way is thinking back to when you were a kid, like what kinds of activities did you enjoy doing that maybe people told you, oh, you can never make a living doing that, or, oh, that's a waste of time. But is it really? Because you hear stories about people who were really loved art or music or dance and were told, you can't make a living doing that. And then other people who were told by their parents, you can do anything. And they went on to have successful careers. So, going back to before, as you said, the world kind of imposes itself on you. What were the things that really brought you joy and fulfillment? So those are clues. It doesn't mean it'll tell you exactly what you're supposed to be doing, but they're really good indicators of where you should be looking, or exploring.
Yeah, I love that. And because it doesn't mean like, oh, that's where I should look professionally. Even it could be like, why don't I take this up as a hobby as an adult? I loved it as a child. Okay, maybe I wasn't going to build a profession as a ballet dancer, but it doesn't mean I can't do that as an adult, right? So right. Good reminders. And, one of the things you say too in the book, you talk a bit about is raising your vibrations. Okay, so tell us, what that is and how we can do it.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've all heard that like phrase all our lives. Oh, this place has good vibes. That person has great vibes. But there's actually a physical basis of that, because our entire bodies, every cell in our bodies is runs on electromagnetic energy or creates electromagnetic energy. They're actual vibrations that we emit. And the HeartMath Institute has been studying the electromagnetic energy that comes off of our hearts when we're in different emotional states. And there's I guess they can deaden when you're feeling depressed or down or angry, whereas they vibrate more fully at an optimal level, which is a higher level, when you're feeling positive, joyful, compassionate, loving. And what's really fascinating too is they've done studies of like children and their pets, and found that the pets can help raise the children's vibrational level, or to match theirs. And people can do that too. They affect one another. When you're in a room, you can definitely feel when someone comes into a room bursting with energy. So there's that physical aspect of it. Our vibrations are affected not just by our emotions, but what we eat, what we take in. And again, it's all one big system, our physiology and our emotional states. So we can raise our vibrations through eating healthy, pure foods, not highly processed ones. Those have a lot of chemicals and things that deaden our senses and actually work against our physiology and our health. Exercise, getting out into the sunshine, into nature, even if it's just stepping outside and looking at the trees or the sky, that can help raise our vibration too, because we do need that contact with nature. There have been tons of studies, as I'm sure you know, on what they now call forest therapy, but it really just means we need to be outside as human beings. So yeah, I'd say those are some of the easy main ways. And I've written a booklet on 12 ways to raise your vibration. There are many others, which is free on my website that people can download, that has some tips for different ways to address mind, body, and spirit.
Love it.
Vibration.
Yeah. Well, because, I think it's interesting what you said, that you can get a sense as somebody walks into the room or what have you, or when you have interactions with someone and you're like, God, I just feel not great after an interaction, right, with them regularly, or I just feel so much lighter and, vibrant. And I think we all want to be the lighter, vibrant, so it's like, what would you say is kind of one of the best ways to really kind of pay attention to the energy that you're giving off, and switch it if you find that you're just like not your best self?
Right. As you were saying that, I was thinking about a couple of people in particular who are pretty low vibe. And I think what helps is when people get outside of themselves, outside of just thinking about themselves and their own issues and their problems, and being inside their heads and directing their attention outside, listening to other people, serving other people, volunteering, doing anything just to get outside. And that's one of the hard things about the last couple of years. A lot of people have had to, for health reasons and other reasons, be more isolated than normal. And that can get you closed in. It's almost like you're shutting down your energetic system in a way. So again, moving outward, out of yourself, out of your head, toward others, offering a hand, listening. I think that's the quickest way. Not that it's always easy as a therapist, for people who are actually in depression, that requires other steps, but it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah. Well, I think it is helpful to keep in mind. It's like, okay, whenever I can go a little bit beyond me and my world and see others, or try to see things from other people's point of view. And as you say, the past 2 years, we've been so insular, so focused on really just like our little pod or our little lives, and, how to begin to really expand that and think community almost, right? Mm-hmm. Like individual, family, community, right? And we just kind of keep expanding. It's a great reminder. Mm-hmm. Now, you also talk about connecting with the wise, still small voice within. How can we do that? How do you encourage people, our listeners, to really find that place?
I'd say meditation is the best way. And meditation can take on many forms. So there's a version for everyone, I'd say. But it's simply about taking the time to stop doing, and even if it's just 10 minutes a day to begin with, to just sit. And even if you have thoughts running through your head, if you just acknowledge that, but don't get carried away with them, that 10 minutes of just being can make a huge difference. And also pay attention when you're doing things that are kind of mindless. Like, I get a lot of great ideas or insights when I'm doing something like doing the dishes or taking a shower, something that doesn't take a lot of mental energy. So meditation can take forms like that, or going for a walk. If you go for a walk outdoors, maybe with a pet if you haven't, if you use that time not to go over your to-do list, or but to just kind of be in the moment, then it's amazing what will come to you.
Well, it makes me think of that Jack Cornfield book, right? And I'm butchering the title, but it's like First Laundry, then Ecstasy or something, right? It's just like recognizing, because as you say, during the dishes, and so it's like in these mundane tasks, this is where we can find really a sense of bliss and peace.
Yeah, we have so much inner knowledge. We don't give ourselves credit for it, but it's there. We might have been hiding it. Other people might have been discrediting it, but it's there. We all have it.
And another way that comes to mind whenever I think about this, why still small voice within, is also journaling, right? Or of course, therapy. But yeah, meditation's great. Yoga's great. I mean, movement's great. But yeah, there is something too about kind of writing, and which you did. And, that's how you pulled this book together, right?
Yeah. And yes, thank you for mentioning movement too, like yoga. So much information, so much memory is held in the body, the physical body. And yoga helps to open that up, to release it and make us aware. I know when I first started doing yoga as an adult, I could not do camel. And I learned that it's just a big heart opener, and I just wasn't ready. But like, after I worked through that, it just was so easy. It's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, those heart openers, they're not easy. And Mary, before I ask you the last question, anything else that you'd like to share with regard to this book, and really, even like our journey, because it's so funny, as we were talking before we began recording, that we go back to 2005. So it's a long time, honey.
It is. Time flies. Yes, we were talking before about how when I first moved here from the Northeast, the first mind, body, spirit workshop that I held was at Tranquil Space on P Street, in this beautiful purple room, if I'm recalling it correctly. Yeah, great space. And I just remember a room full of people in a circle, and it was just so joyous. And I was like, oh, okay, so DC has some cool stuff.
Yeah, that was a really sweet space to remember. And there were like skylights and brick, exposed brick, it's like, I still have visuals of that. It's just like, it was a really sweet space. So yeah, thank you. Cause I think it was around that time we were just starting to do like a bit more lifestyle sort of things, not just like yoga poses, Right. And so I think you were one of the first, in that genre that we were offering.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I think soon after that, your CD came out with, which I have.
Oh, wow. You go way back.
Yes.
I love it. That's great. Well, Mary, my last question for you. Name of this podcast, Tranquility du Jour. And for you as a reluctant healer, how do you find tranquility in your everyday?
I take time to journal. As you said, I make sure that I journal every day. Usually about my dreams or just whatever's going on. And I spend at least 15 to 20 minutes with my dog. She loves to snuggle. And again, she has a great vibration when she's being calm. um, and meditation. Yeah. In whatever form that day.
In whatever form that day. Yeah. And you're still doing and teaching yoga?
Yes, it's been virtual. I went back for a while and then the venue closed down. So yeah, but so at least virtual. So that's been good.
Absolutely. It's so important, right? To be able to be in your body, move the body, and really to have that connection of community, even virtually, is lovely.
Right. Right. And the beautiful thing about virtual is that people from all over who would never be able to get together in person regularly can be together.
Absolutely. It really is a gift. It is one of the beautiful things that's come out of all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. Again, congrats on your book, Lessons from a Reluctant Healer. And thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you, Kimberly, so much for having me on your show. I love it. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate what you do to help make the world a better place.
Thank you.